Hello, my name is Alex, and welcome to Eclectic Eccentrics, a series in which we will be looking at some marvellous and some not so marvellous individuals who have been described as eccentric somewhere along the way. Their stories might delight, terrify, or intrigue you, but they will always entertain.
Tip-top, jolly good, rather nice to see you here. Welcome back to Eclectic Eccentrics. But let us not loiter around any small talk, for we have a brand new eccentric today, a chap called Sir TATTON SYKES. Sir TATTON SYKES, 5th Baronet, was born in 1826 in Yorkshire, England, to parents Mary Foulis and, believe it or not, Sir TATTON SYKES, 4th Baronet. Seriously, is it me, or the upper echelons of historic society just really boring when it comes to naming their kids? It makes research in these podcasts very confusing at times. Anyway, enough grumbling and rumbling from me. The TATTON family lived in a house named Sledmere House, a sizable and very fine Georgian pile. However, as we have seen repeatedly throughout this podcast, despite the family's affluence, Sykes' childhood was not necessarily a happy one. It does seem that Sykes' relationship with his parents was not a great one, as they appear to have been largely absent from his life. His mother would lock herself away in their orangerie, and his father would be away regularly with his racehorses. Now Sykes' father, TATTON Senior we shall call him, has been described as an angry man who allegedly beat his children and was ultimately the reason that his wife would hide away in their orangerie whenever he was home. He was also quite an eccentric himself. He was, for example, a man who dressed in 18th century period clothing, even though he lived during the 19th century, and furnished his house in antique furnishings. On the flip side, he also participated in bare-knuckle fighting, and was happy to roll up his sleeves and help with any physical labour which needed doing, an unusual thing for a baronet to involve themselves in at the time. Finally, it is said that he woke up early every morning in order to walk 4 miles around his library, followed by breakfast, which consisted of cream and beer. It is always hard to tell what impact parents have had on their children. However, when Sykes Jr. inherited the estate following his parents' deaths, he demolished the orangerie and sold his father's racehorses, so make of that as you wish. These were not the only changes that Sykes enforced, for he also banned anyone from planting any flowers on the estate, tenant or otherwise, and would thwack away any flowers he came across with his walking stick, declaring that they were nasty, untidy things. He went on to say that should anyone on the estate want to grow something, then they should grow cauliflowers. He also had a peculiar dislike of doors, so much that he forbade his tenants to use their front doors, insisting they bolt their front doors shut and only use the rear door of their homes. This went so far that during any constructions of new buildings on his land, Sykes would insist that there should be no front door built, only a rear door, though I would say that the rear door would just become the front door, but hey, what do I know? In one source I reviewed when making this episode, allegedly the reason for Sykes' peculiar behaviour when it came to all things front doors was because he allegedly couldn't stand women and children hanging around outside the front of their houses. One of Sykes' most unusual quirks was that he believed the human body should be kept at the same temperature, constantly, and he went to great lengths to achieve this. He would, when ordering clothes, order them in a range of sizes and then would layer himself, slowly building up the layers of clothing. This process was described by a local vicar. On 2 chairs outside his special den were arranged different coats. On one there were heavy overcoats, on the other 4 covert coats, all of different colours, and each was a perfect fit, made to go one over the other and allowing for size. He sometimes wore 6 coats. I have seen him in the church gradually strip off 4 covert coats and ulster, and he still had a coat on. Obviously, the idea of this layering was that if Sykes found himself getting too hot, he could simply just remove a layer. However, when removing a layer, he would just allow the coat to fall to the ground as he continued on his way. This behaviour was well known in the area,
as local children would go around and gather up Sykes' discarded layers in the knowledge that they would receive a small monetary reward when they returned the item of clothing to him later on. This curious behaviour when it came to his health went beyond just his clothing, however, as Sykes also had peculiar eating habits that he wouldn't let anything get in the way of. When it came to grub, Sykes lived on a diet of rice pudding and chewed meat. I say chewed meat because Sykes, when eating meat, would not eat the whole thing. He would in fact chew the meat in his mouth, only sucking out all the meaty juices before spitting the chewed up meat back out. Yummy. Rice pudding, though, appears to have been his favourite. So dedicated was Sykes to this sweet pud that he wouldn't ever miss it, even when his house burnt down. This happened in 1911, when Sykes was halfway through his ricey meal. He did not, initially, make any attempt to escape the fire, and rather continued eating his pudding. It was only after it had become clear that the house was going to burn down completely that Sykes eventually emerged, where he sat down on a chair and spent the next 18 hours watching the flames devour everything. When Sykes was 48 years old, he married a woman named Jessica Cavendish Bentonick, who was 30 years his junior. Notwithstanding the age difference, this was also a peculiar match, as it had been said that Sykes had a dislike of women in general. It is fair to say that this couple did not love each other as much as Sykes loved rice pudding, and they had a difficult relationship. The marriage, it seems, was orchestrated by Jessica's mother, and one could probably infer that this marriage was driven by money, as later in their relationship, Jessica was charged with issuing cheques in Sykes' name. This was after she had had several affairs, and run up huge debts through gambling and drinking, which almost cost Sykes his estate. This earned Jessica the nickname Lady Satin Tights. Things got so bad at one point that Sykes took out an advert in all national newspapers which read, "I, Sir Tatton Sykes, hereby give notice that I will not be responsible for any debts or engagements which my wife, Lady Jessica Christina Sykes, may contract, whether purporting to be on my behalf or by my authority or otherwise." Do not believe that Sykes was entirely innocent in this, however. His great-grandson has alleged that, in an attempt to get his wife to stop spending all his money, Sykes ordered that his son's dogs be hung. It is also alleged that Sykes once, after leaving a funeral, commented that his wife was a remarkable woman, but that he rued the day that he met her. Sykes was a remarkable businessman, and was so wealthy that he was able to restore 18 churches at £10,000 a pop, all from his own pocket. He has been described as the 19th century's greatest church builder. Having worked with some of the greatest architects of the time, Sykes' churches are particularly known for their Gothic style and stunning artistic features. Many of these churches are still operating as places of worship today, and can be visited by following the Sykes Churches Trail. At the fine age of 87, Sir Tatton Sykes, 5th Baronet, passed away in 1913. In a peculiar twist of fate, Sykes outlived his wife, who had died the previous year in 1912. He was buried at St Mary's Church in Sledmere, the place which had been his home his whole life. And with that, we come to the end of Sir Sykes, and therefore the end of the episode. A man who hated flowers and front doors, but loved his rice pudding. Baronet Sykes is indeed a suitable addition to the ranks of our Eclectic Eccentrics. As always, it has been a pleasure to speak to you, and for now, I say goodbye.